SOC analysts are unsung heroes. The SOC Analyst Appreciation Day Awards program recognizes analysts who go above and beyond the call of duty and handle their pressure-packed jobs exceptionally well. SOC leaders nominate your top-performing team members to show them just how much you appreciate everything they do to thwart cybercrime. DEVA will award analysts during this year's SOC Analyst Appreciation Day events on October 19th. You have until September 6th to get your nominations in. Visit securityweekly.com/Devo to learn more. Every hack follows the same pattern. First, hackers exploit a human error, like a leaked key or a secret left in code. They gain a foothold and then pivot, moving from one compromised system to the next. Teleport breaks this cycle. Open source Teleport gives every engineer, every piece of hardware, every application an identity, replacing secrets like passwords and keys with auto-expiring identity-based certificates. Learn why most visionary businesses in the world choose Teleport at securityweekly.com/teleport. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners can save 20% on InfoSec World 2022. InfoSec World will be held September 27th through the 29th at Disney's Coronado Springs Resort in Lake Buena Vista, Florida. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW and use the code ISW22-SecWeek22 to secure your spot. Also, don't miss any of your favorite Security Weekly content by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can subscribe to episode starter packs on Spotify, which are collections of previous episodes of Security Weekly that we feel are pretty awesome. Also, all of our podcast feeds, shows across the entire network, are available on that site, as well as our mailing list, Discord server, and social media and streaming platforms. Now, on to the security news. And now Lee Neely has joined us as well. Lee, are you there?
I am here. Good to be here.
What's up, man? Good to have you. Glad you could join us this evening.
Yes. We got some fun stories. We may want to talk about some for a bit.
Yeah. Tyler, I had two stories for you, and I'm going to flip the order. But my story number 10 talks about anti-cheat software. Anti-cheat software is typically like a Windows device driver, because it has to, so much like Linux, Windows device drivers have to be loaded into the kernel. And they do
device
that,
driver or DLL that's kernel loaded DLL or system level DLL. Yes.
I gotcha. Okay. So, but like an anti-cheat thing is a device driver that's loaded, that's signed. And that's more level, a higher level of privilege than just like administrator on a box. Or you have to be administrator to load that device driver, and that device driver gives you then elevated privileges to talk to other system components and devices.
Correct. So when you're loading as a device driver, you're running at the system level or
at
kernel level, ring zero.
Yeah, okay.
But you're also able to hook those direct sys calls, which is how a lot of these anti-cheat codes are leveraging. They're getting telemetry. They're validating and verifying different aspects at the kernel level, which may have hardware implications or may not, depending on how they do it. But we've seen anti-cheat stuff for quite a while, and that's where DLL sideloading came in, and that's been used since very, very early on in call it 2003, 2004.
But also, like your spy flash with the spy controller on it is essentially like a device that you need a device driver in order to talk to that. And there's like other ones, what was it, LoJax and other malware load this one specific one into the kernel so they can talk directly to the spy controller, which basically brokers access to the spy flash, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it's similar to the like the BCM or the SMM, the control driver or system driver that's loaded that allows that low-level interaction to an additional chip which has different functions, different code, but you're basically using that as a proxy mechanism to lower-level hardware on different devices that have different capabilities.
So I guess my real question is, if you want to protect Windows systems from like this anti-cheat abuse and there's other device drivers that potentially could allow an attacker to modify your UEFI firmware, right, and do other really high privilege things, can you still grant users like the ability to install software and have administrator privileges but prevent them from loading device drivers, even ones that are signed. But I imagine that's hard, right? Like
that's very difficult. You can do delegated write permission for very specific things, and that's typically how we recommend doing that, is hardening the system, allowing delegated writes for software installation of certain signed software or software from a certain vendor. But once you give someone administrative rights, or even in today's world, right, without proper hardening, if you just take away admin rights, the amount of privilege escalation paths that are available in most systems are pretty well thought out, and there's a lot of them. So you have to harden the system and then do the delegated rights and do that in that order so that you're not opening yourself up to an easy priv esc.
So, but what you're saying is if they're administrator, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to not allow them to load device drivers, essentially.
Yes.
And if they're not administrator, it's tricky to get those permissions correct to allow them to actually do stuff but not allow device driver loading.
Exactly. Yep, and you'll see a lot of these kernel level or anti-cheat systems being leveraged for game cheats, and people load these, and then you end up with botnets and the ability for attackers to use and proxy stuff through those devices. Yeah,
I've seen a lot of abuses of in Windows this device driver loading, right? Both in the UEFI and bootkit kind of side of it, but also in these anti-cheat and game cheat kind of things too. Has been getting a little bit of press lately as well. Also, Sean Metcalf came on the show not that long ago and was kind of hinting towards vulnerabilities in Adfs, right? Which the federated services for Active Directory, like federated identity.
No, say it ain't so.
Right? Because, I mean, it's
been an issue for a while, right?
Right. Like, well, it's kind of similar to OAuth, right? Like it's this kind of delegated authentication and authorization, essentially, is OAuth for applications, but federated services is more for users, not applications, but can also be applications, right? At a high level.
Correct. Yeah, and it is. There's many aspects to that, right? Like, and you've got iterations of that with things like AD Connect, which is Azure AD, and the hybrid system that's leveraging on-prem to cloud, and where that authorization happens, and how that auth token and tokens get delegated. So with ADFS, you end up with token claims, which allows certain rules or certain permissions to then delegate permissions to other resources. And so what you've seen recently is now we're starting to actually see in the public view and what's getting disclosed publicly, attackers like APT29 or Cozy Bear or Fancy Bear.
Cozy Bear was my story number 3 and Lee's story number 2.
Yeah, or Nobelium now is the new name for whichever group is disclosing this. But they're leveraging ADFS attacks in order to inject malicious DLLs into or malicious code inside of the legitimate DLL, so that they can bypass token authentication. They can bypass certain certificate validations, and they're using something called Magic Web Tool, which is a newer iteration of the Foggy Web or Foggy something that they were using prior. But now they're able to do different things where they can bypass many of the request controls for certificates using ADFS for valid authorization and access inside and persistence inside of organizations long term. And so they're backdooring this DLL and replacing it.
This sounds like a modern version of I've backdoored login.c so that if it's this username, I just log in. Correct? Is that
it is
what we're talking about? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a trace,
but a new twist on it or something. I mean, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
So inside of the DLL, it's the Microsoft Identity Server Diagnostics DLL. There's a tracelog class function inside of that allows certain validation of things, and they're backdooring that function class in order to have different functionality. And so you really have to do analysis and look for the MD or the SHA-256 hash of this DLL, make sure it's signed, and make sure it's the valid one from Microsoft that hasn't been backdoored. once they have that backdoor, they have quite a bit of access. You can do different build routines. They're monkeying with certs. Like I said, they're doing process claims in order to get valid tokens or renew tokens. So there's interesting things they're using the Magic Web OID values for.
Right. And they're taking advantage of DLL load order to get this thing to go before the legit one that's still on your system.
Correct. Yeah, they give it the same one. They're doing almost like function proxying, except they're using the load order for side loading, and it's getting loaded with the legitimate code as well as the backdoor function class. And so it's valid. It works without having to do the proxying. They're providing it with inside of a different class.
So this felt like a case where people didn't realize their ADFS servers need to be as secure as your domain controllers.
Well, so that's the other problem, right? You end up with AD Connect servers that are not getting put with inside tier 0, but those are syncing the passwords to your on-prem and vice versa. And so again, once those are secure, or if you're leveraging them in a non-secured environment, I don't typically go after domain controllers because there's better things like Exchange or AD Connect or ADFS that have the exact same passwords and or much lower security controls and visibility usually.
Yeah, because people I gotta secure my domain controller because everything I learned up to this point says I gotta secure my domain controller, but this ADFS thing or AD Connect thing, maybe in the kind of warped perception is like, oh, it's not as important. But it's all as important as the domain controller.
Yep. Then I got to jump.
It's interesting. Legacy
thank you very much, Tyler.
I apologize.
Good to see you guys.
Have
Appreciate
a good night.
you.
All right. Take care. So what's interesting is what I'm seeing is a lot of legacy companies are using Azure Active Directory and locking that down like it's solid gold, which it is. It is. Let's be honest. But they're keeping their on-prem Active Directory and they're just doing a constant sync between them. And when I say, do you have the same security on your on-prem as you do between your AAD, your on-prem AD versus your AAD? And they're like, well, I mean, it's on-prem. It's behind our firewall.
No.
Oh, please.
Oh.
And it's something that you have to think of. So this goes to a wider conversation, not a joke. As you have companies that have built-in mindsets and built-in ways of doing things, institutional memory, as you change things, you have to reevaluate the way you did things before.
Yeah, but change is hard, Josh.
Well, I know. I mean, look at your mustache. But sorry.
My
sorry.
mustache hasn't really turned gray yet, but the rest has undergone a change in color.
Oh, dude, don't even talk to me, okay? Come on.
It's very distinguished. I think it's very distinguished.
Well, thank you.
We're now like gray bearded Unix people, basically.
I've gotten my curmudgeon.
Not really.
There you go. Lee's got
really.
the goatee and it's gray as well. You know what that makes? It just makes us all old. That's really what it boils down to.
Curmudgeons. Get off my damn lawn. But no, it's interesting because it really does show that as architecture changes, as protections change, as things change, we have to reevaluate what went before to make sure that we're not retaining or enhancing a vulnerability, a problem, an issue. And architecturally, this is similar, and it goes along with physical security, although they don't recognize it. If you put in new locks, are your old locks more vulnerable because of, your key safe is now not secure? I don't know. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that you have to reevaluate on a constant basis, and companies don't do it.
I think we need to reevaluate the usage of our mechanical keyboards.
Oh, but I love my mechanical keyboard.
I love my mechanical keyboards. I pretty much, other than the keyboard built into my laptop, right? I'm exclusively mechanical keyboards because, mechanical keyboards are like this thing. Larry and I were talking about it, over the years. Like once you are like, oh, I need to look into like a mechanical keyboard. It's like a rabbit hole that you go down and you never come out of, and you're just always.
Like you and headphones?
You like headphones, right? But then going back to the fact that we're vintage now, we grew up on what is the IBM, the old model IBM keyboard?
105.
Is it the 105?
Model M.
Model M.
The IBM 105.
IBM Model M 105, right? Like, I worked for a point of sale company in the 90s, and since we were an IBM partner, like, we exclusively developed, not exclusively, but 90% developed IBM point of sale software built on their platform, which was 4690 back in the day, if anyone remembers that. I mean, you're also old. But every computer had an IBM Model M keyboard attached to it. And I was like, these keyboard, like, I didn't even think about how awesome that keyboard was at the time until you don't use an IBM Model M. And you're like, what is this? This is not a keyboard. I have chiclets on my, like, what is this? This is terrible. This is terrible. I want my keys to have purpose, to chunk when I hit them, right, Lee?
Yep.
I don't know. Sun Microsystems they weren't as chunky. I mean, they were nice keyboards, but the IBM Model M had that, like, really good tactile feedback, right?
Yeah. Well, do you remember the old KSR 33 teletypes?
I do not.
They were mechanical. Those chunked when you hit them. The key had about a half.
Okay, wait a minute. I mean, like, I think I'm old because I learned how to type on a manual typewriter. But like, Lee, you just blew me away there. Okay.
I learned to type on a manual typewriter where they put paper over the keys so you weren't supposed to cheat and look where they were. But in high school I started using those old style terminals, and then they came out with some of the electronic terminals, and they were like, "What?" Yeah. But the IBM ones, the 3270 terminals, and were way better keyboards than like the VT220s. So, but then IBM picked it up again.
And I mean, and then you go down the keyboard hacking route, like whether you're new to it or whether you're more vintage like us and have used those older mechanical. I mean, there really was nothing but a mechanical keyboard at certain junctures, depending on where you worked. That was a keyboard, right? It had a tactile feel to it. Now I think we've talked about on the show, Larry's built some cool keyboards. I use the ones from Drop. I have the Drop. I love the Drop.
They're beautiful.
Keyboard. They're all, and you can choose. Now you've got options like how much click do you want versus like how much throw to the key, like how far down do you have to press the key? Like, you can get really, really specific. My point is, most of it, not even just nerdy tech people like us, but like gamers, right? A lot of us are into these mechanical keyboards. These emanate a certain sound. These sound waves can be interpreted, and using software that I linked to in my story number 8 can determine which key was pressed. Now, there's some caveats here, and there's a link to a website. So I believe he coded this in JavaScript, so you can load this website. You can push a button, give it access to your microphone, and it will listen to your keystrokes and attempt to determine what your keystrokes are. So I tried this because I was like, I got to try this, and it didn't really work that great. And again, I had some background noise, and whatever. So certain acoustical things you got to do to increase your chances of success. This didn't work for me, but it's proven to be like feasible that in certain environments you could extrapolate which key was pressed based on the sound that it makes.
Come on, they've done this with hard drive lights, with keyboard sounds now, with this goes back to Tempest. Okay, where you can actually watch the electron gun at a shoot the electrons at the CRT phosphor powder.
Right.
Yep.
So like you got to be in a quiet room. You got to have like, if it's on your phone next to your keyboard, the keyboard doesn't even have to be plugged in during the test, which is pretty funny. And type some English text only in lowercase, and try not to type faster than 250 characters per minute. Is that CPM? Is it characters per minute? How they rate? Yep. So like, and it tells you when you load this little app in your browser, like how many characters per minute. Like, and I was lucky to be typing it like maybe 90, and I think I type moderately fast, right? Which I guess is kind of like everyone thinks since we work with computers, we can type really fast. No, we hate typing. It's just the way we have to interface with the computer, right?
Well, that's because we all show them Hacker Typer and
Yeah.
They think we type really fast. We're just banging the keyboard at that point.
Right, pretty much. Yeah.
But when we're actually typing, I actually two fingers and two thumbs and an occasional pinky for a return key or whatever.
Right.
And that's how I type. And people are like, wait, how do you type so fast with just like 4 fingers? Lots of frigging practice.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, again, this is more covert channel kind of research, right?
Right. But it does highlight one of the issues with that is also exists in the Tempest space, and that is the signal to noise ratio is critical for it to work. You'd have to be in a quiet room. You can't get going too fast, otherwise you get too much noise in the system.
So just always be playing really loud techno music in your office, and you're good.
Janet Jackson, take out those 5,400 RPM
recommendation.
Janet Jackson. Oh God! But then then you go insane. But boy, where do we want to go next?
Well, actually, I wanted to talk
about Lee's story 3.
Yeah, Lloyd's of London.
Yeah, this is hot for me. Like, this is
the deal.
Huge.
Is Lloyd's of London has said they're not going to insure state-backed cyber attack or undeclared acts of war on their insurance policies, starting at the end of March 23.
Wait,
and I can understand.
If I'm the victim of an undeclared act of war, I can't claim it on my insurance.
Right.
Ding.
Well, think about this. How are you going to differentiate between Fancy Bear coming after you and somebody who's just a sympathizer and is really good? Attribution is a real bitch.
Well, come on, we got dice.
We do.
Oh yeah,
is that what?
But is it 20 or 40-sided die?
Hold on, let me submit my claim and roll the dice. Take a picture of it with my phone and upload it through my insurance carrier's app.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand why they want to do it. I just think it's totally not doable. But you had some thoughts, Josh.
Well, I mean, okay, so let's talk about this for a second. If let's lay out a scenario or two. You are a small business. You get ransomware. It is somewhere because of Ukraine or some conflict, or because you have a firewall technology that the Chinese want. By the way, true story. And so you get breached, ransomware, hacked, whatever, because it's a state-sponsored act of cyber warfare. Your cyber insurance company says, sorry, no. So now what is that doing to small businesses and actually large businesses as well, in terms of their cyber insurance coverage, in terms of their willingness to do business in the cyber world, if you will, to do software development, to do whatever? What are the societal and economic implications of a cyber warfare change to a cyber insurance coverage? I find this fascinating. Forgive me.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't opt out of being the victim of a cyber attack from a enemy nation state, though.
It's like a gun-free zone. Yes, so it totally works.
But I mean, that's not how, also, I guess my point is that's not how insurance works. Most homeowners' insurance policies don't cover floods. So this is like a similar kind of thing, right? As Josh takes a sip of vodka from the bottle.
It's time to party, baby. Okay.
It's a glass.
So flood insurance exists. And as a matter of fact, if you live in a high flood risk zone,
it's a separate...
It's a separate insurance policy, and there's federal high-risk pools that you are mandated to be able to buy into if your standard insurers, Liberty Mutual, whatever, won't insure you.
But there should be the same thing then for nations. It should be like a flood thing, like I can opt into it.
But they're not. The government is not offering that type of insurance.
Well, the government,
and probably smartly so, because as we all know, we've discussed this before on the show, cyber insurance coverage is getting very expensive because the cyber insurance companies are realizing, hey, this sucks. We're losing money hand over fist.
Yeah.
10 years ago, it was $100 to insure your company for cyber insurance. For anything, ransomware, virus, stupid somebody who drops coffee on the server, whatever. Okay. But cyber insurance was $100 a year. It was an add-on. They give you sometimes they'd give it to you for free. Now companies are having nightmares getting cyber insurance. But if you are not allowed, if the exclusions in your cyber insurance coverage are mandated, you're not allowed to negotiate them. You're not allowed to get separate coverage for them. You're not They're just there. Big gaping holes you can drive a Mack truck through. What does that do to your business?
It means you have to work to secure yourself.
Right.
And
Does it?
But still, but also,
Optimist.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, you could try and flood proof as much as you want, but like, dude, if a flood's coming, like a flood's coming. Like, unless you can convert your building into a boat, like you're screwed, right? Like,
and I think I read somewhere that Lloyd's does not insure against kinetic acts of war either. So, the Russians blow through your house in Ukraine and they were insuring it. They're not covering it. But the cyber seems like a much wider breadth in terms of where it could go and what it could cost. You know how much a dwelling will cost to replace, more or less. But cyber, you can get really, really expensive fast. But and like I said, there is no plan B. You can't buy the more expensive coverage, right, Josh?
I mean, is the plan B just have really good backups?
Dude, okay, so the problem is you're thinking of ransomware, and ransomware with really good backups is it's not a bad backup plan, pun intended. But what about when your information is breached?
Once
backups
it's out,
going to help you when it's breached.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of problems there. If your information is stolen, that's a breach. If your information is destroyed, that's a breach with information destruction and recovery from. But either way, you've got issues, man. And so if you can't get coverage, if it's termed cyber warfare, we're going to see court cases as to what's the definition of cyber warfare. What are the signs and symptoms of it being? If it comes from a server in China, is that cyber warfare? What if it comes from a server in Ohio that got routed from China? Okay. There's all these things that are going to be problematic about this.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating and terrifying all at the same time.
I mean, to be honest, this is the conversation I was hoping we'd had when I put that article up. So thank you.
Okay. So Lee, you're at a national lab.
Right.
Okay. Is there any, so presumably you hear some of the government discussions about these kinds of things. Is there any formal definition of cyber warfare that we can use on a day-to-day basis?
Not that I could pull out of my ass.
I don't really want it coming from there, but anyway, sorry.
Or any other locality, digital or physical.
Paul, can you pull one out of your ass?
I mean, I could, but it would stink. Basically.
Oh, pun is so good and so bad all at the same time. I hate you and I love you. Okay. So then we've got the question of what is cyber warfare? What are the signs and symptoms of it? What are the ways that people are going to do like anti-forensics on cyber warfare? Because that's going to be weird. Can you do insurance fraud on cyber warfare? Like, maybe. Dude, this is going to be interesting.
I think you'd want to do the if I'm the attacker, I'd want it covered by insurance so it gets paid. No? I mean, some scenarios, right?
Potentially, but what about if I want to if I want to destroy the company? If I can show that the information was breached and it was an act of cyber warfare, faked, but an act of cyber warfare, I can destroy the company.
It would ensure that the company is destroyed, rather than like if it traced not back to cyber warfare, they could put an insurance claim in and be back in business, right? I want to
right
ensure that it is destroyed.
But if I want to destroy a company,
that's interesting.
I co-opt a server in China.
I make it look like cyber war so that it's not covered by insurance. I destroy
my competition.
Right.
I can destroy your competition.
I mean, at that point, if you're going to get insurance reimbursement, and I mean, we've all got that. We can all put our evil hats on and go, how would I destroy a company, right? Like, even if you're covered by insurance, you're still destroyed. I'm going to wipe out all of your systems, right? At, let's just say, the firmware level. Okay, you're going to get an insurance policy, but like I've already destroyed all your systems and all of your data. Maybe I've gone into the cloud and I've destroyed all your data. Like, can you really recover from that?
Honestly, Paul,
I'll do you one better.
Need to do is show that there are some packets coming from China or Russia or wherever, and then release 20 records 500 records, whatever, onto the open internet that you've gotten from OSINT or from a previous company database purge or whatever, and then cast shadows that they had an attack that they're covering up. When somebody comes in to investigate and sees that there are records on the internet that were released, presumably from the bad guys, and that there are packets showing that those packets came from China, Russia, whatever, bad shit happens. You don't actually have to fulfill a complete attack.
Right.
But I wanted to burn up their generator and knock out their cyclotrons permanently.
You're around way too many national lab facilities to have cyclotrons, dude.
Oh. I actually have two words from the national lab perspective. Self-insured. 100% self-insured.
The national labs are self-insured.
Yes. At least the big ones are. Yes. Everything. From workman's
That's
comp
fascinating.
to IT, every bit of it.
Interesting.
That kind of changes the tone, doesn't it?
Mm.
Walmart and the national labs and BlackRock, these are companies that are able to self-insure, and maybe Salesforce or somebody like that. But how far down the line can you self-insure?
Yeah. What about Lastpas?
How much money are you willing to put into that?
What about Lastpas? They had a security.
They're not self-insured.
Yeah.
They're not.
Did you guys see that? Did you guys see that though? I don't.
Yeah, I did. I felt for them. I mean, they freaking lost IP here in property and source code.
Yeah, not user accounts. I mean, the architecture.
No, it's a development.
Because they've got pretty sound architecture, right? I mean, I use LastPass. Yeah, I use LastPass. Their architecture's been sound. They've had breaches. They've disclosed them, right? I've got and so this is an interesting thing for an organization, especially one like LastPass that's charged with protecting your passwords that protect you access to your data, right? Like the stakes are higher conceivably for an organization like LastPass. They've got a proven track record now. So this is like a PSA for all companies out there that, insecurity or not, if you want to build confidence and build a sustainable business, you will use LastPass and in many other companies as an example and go like, this is how you disclose a breach. Like transparency, good communications, and it's okay if you do that. It's okay if you do that again because you did it right the first time, the second time, and now the third time. Like we believe you now, right? And also we haven't seen evidence on the dark web that my information's being traded around, right? There's also some validation that kind of organically happens there as well. So I think they did a good job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you always get the people that'll fight you on that, but like they don't store your master password, man. Like it's in the FAQ and it's well documented on their site.
So the thing that went through my mind when I read this is that now LastPass lost potentially some of their secret sauce. How are they going to recode things to not rely on that purloined code and push out an update? And I would hate to be one of their developers right now working on that because they got to find new ways to do what they were doing without breaking the existing install base, right? That could be, I mean, it could be wicked cool when it's done, but what a journey.
That's this kind of self-insuring.
Protecting the development environment is becoming increasingly important, right? And I think this is just one case we've seen where attackers are going after developers, which is really interesting, right? We've seen it in the open source community, in the rules now, because of the public software supply chain, especially with open source, right? Which is kind of why I call it public supply chain, is under attack because the developers are under attack. Well, let's just put more security rules and regulations around the developers. Does that really fix the problem or just make it more inconvenient for developers? I guess it's a classic security versus convenience type argument.
I don't think we found the happy medium yet.
Yeah. Because just making it harder to do development is not making it more. It should be making it more secure for developers to do what they do, not making it more inconvenient. And having been a developer, like, it's already an inconvenient friggin' process to develop software, right? Let alone security getting in your way. Like, look, we can, sit up on our pedestals as security people and go, you should develop more secure software. Like, have you ever tried doing that? Like, that shit's hard. Like, it's hard enough to develop software. So I thought it was interesting they were going after developers in this case too.
You're actually reminding me of a conversation I had with a development team where we do an app security scan, and they'll address the issues found. And I said, well, come on, there's other things in the code here. You should be looking deeper than that. And they're talking about the interdependencies, the release cycle, and they don't have the resources, and that we're just going to focus on the high risk. And it's easy to lose sight of as a security researcher that the practical realities of that development team that, sure, we'll trade out this buggy library and we'll break 15 other products. Not okay. We'll take note of it and do what we can, but there's only so much we can do, particularly on a small team of only a couple folks. I mean, hell, you can see it in their faces before you finish talking, right?
Yeah.
There's, you got to find the way to reduce the risk in easy ways without putting them out of business.
But even it's harder for large companies too. Like I've talked last week and this week about Microsoft's latest KB crap. What is that? I had it right on the tip of my tongue too. Their KB for the DBX update causing all kinds of issues, man. And like, I try not to paint it in the light of like Microsoft screwed up and we should all hate on Microsoft, right? Like KB 5012170 is the update that pushes out effectively a new DBX revocation list. And that caused, BitLocker recovery, it forced, systems into and other kinds of errors. But like, don't blame Microsoft for that. Like, this crap is hard. It's hard.
And oh, by the way, Microsoft has got a hell of a lot of process and validation.
Right.
They didn't just like click commit and publish it. They like did stuff to make sure it wouldn't break, and still things broke. And so I try to give everybody credit for not being, I don't know, like I once was once upon a time.
Yeah,
we're smarter.
Older. I'm sorry, what?
Unless you're Apple, and then we can give them crap. Did you guys see my story number 5?
Oh my God.
Ars Technica did an amazing job writing this article titled "Some Macs Are Getting Fewer Updates Than They Used to, and Here's Why It's a Problem." They went back into the entire history, like back to 1999. Like, how long did Apple support your software and firmware on a Apple Mac that you bought in 1999, right? And then how does that differ from one you bought in 2008 or 2012? Like, how long did you get after that in terms of updates? They did amazing analysis, analyzed all the data. And I thought from a security perspective, this was interesting from a couple of reasons. So they say a decade ago, it was definitely more common to consider a computer's performance and capabilities when defining system requirements, not driver or firmware security. These are the conversations that I'm having now with folks, is that I want a fast laptop. I want a fast server. Factored into that today is, but wait, whatever I buy today, like, how long am I going to get firmware or security updates? Put them in two different categories, even though they're essentially the same category, right? Because it's all software. Firmware is just software that's inconvenient to program.
How about this? How long is this machine viable to use safely?
And that's and then you'd look at OT and ICS, very different from your average IT department that's pushing out a laptop, right? So the answer to that is it depends. And I agree, Joshua. Like, that's going to enter, like, how long is the lifespan going to be for my usage? How long do I think the operating system and hardware manufacturer is going to support not just operating system updates, but also firmware and or hardware updates to this, or I should say firmware updates to the system, right? I got to make that stuff last for as long as I think I'm going to use it and replace it with something else.
Remember when laptop lifespans were like 7 years?
Yeah.
And this is a long time ago. And, basically these days, laptop lifespans we replace every 3 years on an enterprise level. But realistically, I have laptops that are much older than that. And although I have a new framework, I wanted to try the framework. I have laptops that I used for quite a while. I've got Linux on a couple of them, FreeBSD on one, et cetera, et cetera. There's no problem with that. And that's another thing. I can revive an older x86 or 64-bit laptop with a Linux variant that's designed for it.
Right.
But a Mac, what do I do with it?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And this is a common question that I get, which I also think is interesting on the firmware side of things, is like basically one of the things I gleaned from this article was like Apple makes and I'm not necessarily picking on Apple. I think this goes across all hardware manufacturers. But this article is talking about Apple. So they design and build a laptop as an example. And like not everything in there is necessarily Apple controlled, right? Like they're licensing some hardware and firmware and drivers to make that stuff work.
Right.
How long should they support that? So they build that laptop, and now 5 years later, they're looking at pushing out a new operating system going, wait, that 5-year-old laptop has this device driver that we had to license some stuff for, and we'd have to do a lot of work to make it compatible with the operating system. So you know what? We're just not going to support that. Like that's what drives their decision for how long it should support. Like I'm not going to, now I have to update this firmware. I got to make sure this firmware can be pushed out through my operating system because Apple controls the entire ecosystem. Like, do I want to do that for something that, like, where's the cutoff point? Like, oh, that older, Apple has this particular Intel chipset, and that was kind of the cutoff point before we moved to this next Intel chipset. So you know what? That older Intel chipset, like, yeah, we're not going to go through the work to do that. I get that. Like, manufacturers got to draw a line somewhere.
I'm gonna throw a tack under that tire. What about desktops? Mac Pros from 2013 are supremely capable machines. Still,
the trash can.
The soup can trash can Macs.
We still have a trash can in freaking A. It's from 2013, and holy shit, it might be one of the faster computers we still have in the damn building.
Do you know you can get them on eBay right now for between $600 and $800?
Holy crap!
Whoa. Seriously, so
you might not get. You're not going to get the latest like firmware and software on it from Apple. I don't know where the OS cutoff was on our trash can.
And that's the kicker, because that machine, which was how many thousands of dollars when it came out, is still supremely.
We paid $5,000 for it. Yeah,
that exact same machine you can now get for $700 or $800 on eBay. Yep. I was actually contemplating it because I'm like, that's a really nice desktop. But that desktop, which is still incredibly capable, it's not a MacBook, an original MacBook Air, which with today's stuff it'd be like plug.
Oh God,
it's really, really capable.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me I can't use it anymore? Sorry, go to hell. Come on, that's a very expensive, very capable, solidly usable machine. Why the fuck can't I use it?
But it's the same thing. Like, you can get Xeon-based servers for almost in some cases free or really cheap. And
if anybody needs a server, yell. I'll point you at places you can get them for damn near free
and
or absolutely free. It's ridiculous.
But the older Xeon stuff will freaking run forever because it's because of the not just the cores but like the cache, right? L1, L2, L3 cache on there is ridiculous. We've got one sitting downstairs. Like I can still run VMs on it. I can run multiple VMs on it, and the thing was free. And it was I don't know how many years old.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, by the way, is how you get people into the industry as well. Yeah. Because they can build a home lab. There's subreddits that I'm on, Home Lab and Home Lab Sales and Hardware Swap and things like that. You can pick up servers that are 5 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. that are still incredibly capable, incredibly viable, run a dozen friggin' VMs on and whatever else, and you load Linux on them, or some hypervisor, and they run and they're great. But that same Mac server, I mean, it's a desktop, but it's really, let's be honest, it's oomphy. I can't use anymore because Apple says so.
Yeah, because Apple's like, I'm not giving you. But I mean, I think we still do get updates. Goose is telling me we still do get updates from that.
How long will you get updates for?
But how much longer?
Monterey, is it Monterey? What's it called? Says that anything before 2017 is not supported anymore.
Right.
Right.
That 5-year cutoff. And then you're not going to get firmware updates either. And again, that's a question I get all the time. Like, what do I do when my hardware manufacturer is not providing firmware updates any longer? And I'm like, hope that you can put open source firmware on it. Like maybe you can put Core Boot on it and it'll support it for longer. Like that's some of my hope if it's been abandoned by the hardware manufacturer. So you can still use that stuff. I can't believe those are selling for
put your developer hat on.
2013 trash can Mac is a serious, still to this day, a serious friggin' computer. I mean, graphics card and all, probably it's still a serious computer.
Yeah. Oh, not arguing that, but put your developer hat on. How many ports do you want to support of a different application?
Right.
You know, how many platforms do you want to test it on? Test regression testing every change on before you release. At some point, you have to say, no, I can't do that anymore. And it is tempting to say all.
Sorry, in Discord, I just threw the link. Paul, if you want to be sick, go ahead, click the link.
If you want to be owned, click the link. Oh my God!
No, there's an 8-core, 64 gig of RAM, 1 terabyte SSD for $725.
That's a great computer.
That's a great computer, dude.
That's a fast computer for $725. That is a freaking fast computer.
That would have been $6 or $7 or $10,000 back.
Yes, they were between like $5 and $10,000, depending on how you configured them. Yep. And it says it runs Monterey. When is Monterey? I don't remember.
It does, and it's got enough horsepower. Although I'm wondering how long they're going to support Intel.
Yeah.
Because now we've got the M1, M2s. Well, hell, PowerPC Macs are a thing of the past. Motorola Macs are a thing of the past.
They've been a thing of the past for how long now?
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, Intel is going to be, now that they're M1 and M2, like you said, I don't see them supporting Intel past another 2 years.
Yeah. Because again,
maybe
it's that whole OS firmware thing. Like, how long do I want to support that older architecture that they're not developing on now?
Do you know my uncle ran a cabinet maker shop? He's one of the top cabinet makers in the world, and he used Claris CAD, which only ran on the PowerPC Macs. I supported.
Oh, there's a name from the.
And I had a PowerPC Mac laptop.
Do you remember the the Mac Pro 5? The one the first one that really came out, it was this beautiful aluminum chassis.
Yeah.
And like I hoarded 4 or 5 of them for him, and I would ship him one to Oregon, or he'd buy one.
And that was a PowerPC.
I was out there to fix it up.
Was that
for years until he retired.
That was a PowerPC, right?
Yeah, it was a PowerPC Mac, the last PowerPC Mac Pro.
Because their Mac Pro line, they kept PowerPC, but they switched to Intel on their laptop line first, right?
Yep. And it was the one that was liquid cooled with dual processor, full separate dual processors on daughter boards.
Yeah.
And like dual video card slots and liquid cooling would leak, and it was, oh God.
This sounds like
interesting things.
I mean, and this is one of the reasons why I switched to did I tell you that I use Linux as my daily driver? Because like people that use Linux as their daily driver go out of their way to tell you they use Linux as their daily driver. This is one of the reasons that I switched, because I can buy commodity hardware and I can support it for as long as I want to support it, right? As long as I can get Linux support on it, I can run it. And that's one of the reasons why I switched.
But the only thing I worry about with the old PC argument is that, those capacitors swell and go. And, I mean, you can replace them, but I'm not sure. No thanks.
Oh, my God. Somebody on Discord just mentioned, was it Gauss? Gauss, he mentioned that on eBay, the Tesla P100s, the NVIDIA Tesla P100s are like $300. He's right. That's terrifying. These are GPU accelerator cards, like 16 gigs, 24 gigs, whatever, $300. He's like, build a Hashcat box, just pick a server and pack it with 5 of these things. It'll crack anything in no time. He's right.
Nice.
Sorry.
On a kind of non-technical note, you guys think John McAfee's still alive?
No.
I haven't watched the documentary, but my comment was I think he's roommates with Tupac.
So John McAfee's definitely still alive.
You think so?
Absolutely. The question is not, is he still alive? The question is he corporeal or just an imaginary friend? Because there's people that are going to believe he's alive forever and a day.
Just like
if his body is still alive, that's great. We'll never know because he's fucking crazy. Okay? Everything he could do would be seen as crazy. And, oh, no, that's not John. John wouldn't do that. Or John would do that. He should have done this. So absolutely not him. Or it is him. Or he's alive in some people's minds, and that's all that matters.
I mean, it's interesting that the documentary, so what I'm talking, my story number 4 is that his ex-girlfriend says that he faked his death and is still alive in Texas. I don't know how we comment on that. Like, how do we? I don't know. I don't know. It's weird.
Well, he's living in Texas, which makes a lot of sense. He's fucking crazy, and honestly, these days, so is Texas. So it fits perfectly.
I mean, there's a lot of craziness happening in the world. John McAfee still being alive would, I don't know, not rival a lot of the craziness happening in the world today.
Let's start a story that he rumor that he's either in Elon's basement or Larry Ellison's basement.
Right.
Alive and well. Larry's crazier than Elon, but
it's
I don't know.
I don't know. I haven't have you guys watched the documentary? The new one? I haven't watched the new one yet. There was an older one, but there's a new Netflix documentary that was released about a week ago.
Yeah.
I gotta watch that.
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen the documentary. I hear it's very good, but I haven't seen it. But frankly, any documentary about John McAfee is going to be entertaining. It may not be factual, but it's going to be entertaining.
Yes.
Okay.
He was a guest. He was a guest on this show. Did you know that?
I didn't. When?
Yeah. Oh, it's somewhere. It's a YouTube video. It's in the archives. You can watch my interview with John McAfee.
Yeah.
He was at DEF CON, 5 years ago? 6 years ago?
Right after that, I did go just introduce myself to him in person at DEF CON. He was with like a big entourage and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm
Paul Security Weekly, episode number 412.
There you go.
Interview with John McAfee.
I'm thinking, who would drop more F-bombs, John or Jack?
I have to go watch it and figure it out, right?
Yep. So I was going to say, we were talking about old hardware support. My number 1, iOS 12.5.6, which only goes up to the iPhone 6 Plus, not the S. So that's 6 years old. No, 7. I'm trying to count. Old ass hardware.
Careful, you might have to take your shoes off.
I did, and I ran out of toes.
It says available for iPhone 5S, Lee.
Yeah. So
hey,
I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to switch gears, so go ahead, finish up. I apologize.
No.
So I was just going to finish up by saying, look, the last iOS update, 15.6.1, had 2 CVEs in it that were supposed to be bad. This one, the WebKit CVE 2022-32893, bad enough that they backported the fix for
12.5.6
devices.
Yeah.
Maybe you might want to apply either one of those updates and not think about it.
Yeah, they backported a WebKit vulnerability going all the way back to an iPhone 5S.
Yeah.
Released today.
Yeah. I just thought, whoa.
Oh my God.
That vulnerability.
Gauss just threw an Amiga on the Discord.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
That may have been released when your iPhone 5S was released around the same
time.
Oh,
stop it. You know, the Amiga still has one of the best MIDI controllers and MIDI systems still. Mm-hmm. There's musicians that still use them because their MIDI is so good.
I like how there's a pair of glasses on the Amiga keyboard.
Yes, because anybody who has an Amiga is old.
So let's see when the last time that got a software update.
You were complaining about only having your close glasses at the beginning of the show.
I'm so old I have multiple pairs of glasses.
I'm so old I'm thinking of getting some readers because I'm realizing I have to hold things farther away to see them.
Well, that's
even with my glasses on.
My close glasses are my readers, right? My far away glasses are my progressives. Yes. Which in the bottom, right, have the readers.
Yeah. Can we actually switch gears? I'd love to talk about the Pi.
Oh yeah,
sure. Yeah.
So I did. It's so hard to find a Raspberry Pi, but so the one just before we dig into this, like, I've got a stack of Raspberry Pis here in the studio, and I'm like, like that's a stack of gold right there. Like, please don't let anything bad happen to those Pis, because you can buy them, but the same kit that I bought a couple of years ago. That cost me $109, and it was a Raspberry.
You bought a can of kit with all of the wires and everything else. Yes,
Verillos, with the one with the V. It was a kit.
Okay.
With the, I think it came with the micro SD card, the case that has the fan in it. You put the fan on it, right, and it has the HDMI adapter, right. So like all said and done, it was $109, and it's a really cool Pi kit. When we did the, what is Leonard's project? The Wi-Fi intrusion detection system, whatever that's called. Larry and I worked on it together. When I did that, that was the Pi I bought for that project. We did like multiple iterations on it. We bought a Wi-Fi adapter for it. It'll come to me. But so I just like repurposed that Pi today, and I was like, looking at what I paid for that kit, it was $109. You look at that same kit today, they're selling for over $200 on Amazon. They're price gouging because they're such in demand.
Jeez.
Dude. Okay, so I outfitted my house with Ubiquity, right?
Yeah.
I've got cameras, I've got access points, I'm running Wi-Fi 6 and all that kind of stuff throughout the entire house, okay? And if you want to buy an Ubiquity camera, you literally have to wake up at 5:45 on the East Coast and stalk the website and like play Shmoocon ticket, F5 the hell out of it. And then you can maybe get an order in for a couple of cameras or an access point. They're out of stock on everything. There's a somebody set up a paging alert, SMS text alert if something comes in stock. There's a subreddit Ubiquity in stock to say, oh, there's stuff in, and you set it up to alarm you. There's an alerts function, so it'll alert you and notify you, hey, this camera came in stock. And you're like, and you have to have your credit card saved on the website and your shipping and delivery instructions saved. And then if you're really lucky, you can get one. Some of them too.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's been a struggle. I finally, I bought 4 extra cameras because I'm like, I might need them.
Yeah. Right. Get them while you can. So this person, GitHub is called BrickBots. The project is called Handy Pi. It's a Raspberry Pi 4-based computer with a 36-key tactile keyboard and display. It's a 3D printed, I believe, case that holds the Raspberry Pi, the small display, and the keyboard layout is, what was the key? It was a different keyboard layout.
Miryuk or something like that. Yeah, I saw that. It's basically it's a QWERTY keyboard, but it's split in 2 for thumb typing.
He says, I really like the Miryuk layout and use it on all my keyboards. He's actually got another external keyboard that is in the same layout. I don't know. See, I don't know if I could ever switch to a different keyboard layout. That's hard.
There's okay. I mean, we're going back to the mechanical keyboard talk, but there's orthogonal. Yeah. There's staggered. There's a split. There's equal distance. There's stadium. There's flat. There's all kinds of mechanical keyboards.
Different layout, different ergonomics that are separate from the way the keys are laid out. Like Dvorak, the keys are laid out in a different way
Right.
from
They're
your
in a
standard.
different
Okay,
coordinate.
look down at your keyboard right now. Are the keys at a diagonal? So if you look at, Q, A, and Z, are they right above each other or on a diagonal?
Oh, so they're right above each other. Oh, so I see what you're saying. The layout is, so he calls it a layout, but the layout is the same, but the ergonomics are different. Because Dvorak is a totally different layout, right? Like the keys are,
Correct.
Yes.
The letters are in different places. The numbers and characters and all are in different places. Right?
Absolutely.
So this is in the same place, but just ergonomically it's different.
Yeah.
It's split thumb typing, exactly. So it's designed for 2 thumb typing. So each thumb has a half of the keyboard.
I gotcha.
I had to zoom in on one of the pictures to make sure of that because I wasn't familiar with that layout.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It is very cool. It's big.
It looks like he design this keyboard?
Oh, yeah. He had the PCBs cut for him. So you can order a PCB from, I think, PCBWay. You can have the case 3D printed. You can solder everything yourself. It's all through hole. It's not surface mount, but it's a lot of work. It's very cool, but it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I filed this under. I filed this under like things that I think are really cool, but I probably won't get to in my lifetime.
And Gauss is telling me that PCBWay totally steals all your shit, but it's worth it. Why is it worth it, Gauss?
Oh, they steal your designs?
I don't know. That's what Gauss is saying.
Mm-hmm.
So Gauss, speak up.
Oh, the build tours.
Oh, and somebody's throwing in there. Oh, there's Sammy throwing in the stacks of Raspberry Pis that are sitting in a corner because Paul doesn't use them right.
Yeah, they're there in case we need them. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think you
also put an interior shot of that Amiga on the Discord channel too.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
It is so clean.
Yeah, well, he said the ROMs and CPU card are less than a year old. Wait, is that Arduino-based parallel port Ethernet interface that runs at ISDN speed? I think just with that one sentence, Gauss, you win bingo.
Yes. Nerd Award of the Week. Yeah,
Good
so
Lord.
I thought the Handy Pi was pretty cool.
Yeah, no,
I
it's
think it's
very
very
cool. This is awesome. I know a certain sound instructor should be tempted to build one.
Right? Larry.
Larry.
Yeah. Larry, of course.
My story number 18 was interesting. I'm not even sure how I found this, but it's a Microsoft Tech community post. And here's my take on it, right? Eclipsium researchers, Mickey and Jesse, like, yeah, again, they did this with Boothole and bootloaders, Grub vulnerabilities, right? They presented this year, and they identified 2 different vulnerabilities across 3 different bootloaders, I believe. We did the interview with them on the show, right? So you folks heard that. So, and what this triggers is the DBX update that we talked about earlier. But part of this process is, like, if Paul and Josh wanted to go develop a bootloader or any other kind of software that is in the boot process for an operating system, that we could take that code, our bootloader, Paul and Josh bootloader, submit that to Microsoft and go, hey, Microsoft, we want you to sign this, issue a key and sign this bootloader so that a hash for this bootloader is in the allowed list for secure boot. And Microsoft would go through some type of process to do this, right? They would ask questions like, hey, Paul and Josh, like, what are you doing to manage your keys? Like, how are you protecting your private key? Like, because otherwise, if you lost your private key, other people could sign software that would turn out to be a hash that would sign with your key, like things like that. And I think I asked Mickey and Jesse this on air, and I was like, what else do they check for? Like, are they looking for vulnerabilities in the bootloader? Obviously not really well, because Mickey and Jesse have found vulnerabilities in bootloaders. But this technical post, it's my story number 18, is titled New Ufica Memory Mitigation Requirements for Signing. So now Microsoft is requiring that if your code that's going to be signed with the third-party CA as part of that process now has to include additional memory mitigations in it. So they've basically, like, upped the game So they have the more security in the code that's being signed in their third-party ecosystem.
So are they checking?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's a great, right? Like they're like, crap.
Yeah.
We let code go through that maybe shouldn't have been signed. Like maybe should require some better security for stuff that we're signing. And like, why not?
Security for signed code. What's wrong with you, man? Come on.
Right?
It's not like it's a firmware problem.
Signed code should just be like, oh, like I made this code, it's from me, and I manage my key like really well. Like I'm telling you that I manage my key really well, so it's all good. I don't know if that is the process, but maybe someone who has insights into this process can tell us.
So basically, as if I'm going to release some new firmware, I got to have it signed by Microsoft, and they're going to check it for the stuff as part of that process before I can successfully deploy it and boot Windows on it.
Not just firmware, Liba, a bootloader as well.
I mean, bootloader,
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll blame the wine.
It could be firmware too, but. So I thought that was.
I mean, I like that. It feels kind of like
it's good.
Dynamic code analysis, checking and make sure the shit's there. Not a bad thing.
But also, I think it speaks to like security research actually affecting change in our industry. Like
that's crazy talk,
right? I don't like to think that we just sit here in our labs and poke holes at things, and then emerge from our said hole from our lab and go, this is a problem. Someone should definitely fix that, and then crawl back into our holes and go do more security research, right? Like this research should affect change in our industry. It should force things like this to happen. There should be better requirements. There should be a better process. There should be things implemented that help prevent this bad things from happening in the future. So I thought that was good. And I don't know if it's a direct result from making Jesse's research. That's mere speculation on my part, but I like to think that's the case. And I mean, I mentioned a post a few weeks back where we kind of point out like research that has been done in particularly the firmware space and other spaces as well, I'm sure, but in the firmware, right, like has triggered some change in our industry.
So I'm thinking, we've got these checks, and I'm assuming there's some checking done. If I sit on my Windows box and attempt to deploy a firmware update, it doesn't have the proper signatures and stuff, it's going to fail. Now we got to get that kind of check and assurance ported over to the Linux chain, so that you can't just boot Linux and bypass all that.
Yeah, so for Linux to participate in secure boot, that code also has to be submitted to Microsoft. Ironically,
okay,
because Microsoft controls the third-party CA for secure boot. So any software that is validated for participation in secure boot has to go through Microsoft. And I tell you, Lee, when you start reading the stuff on the internet like I have, not everyone in the open source community likes that idea. I mean, you can get it, right? Like, why Microsoft is the entity that validates all this stuff.
Right. I mean, I'm just envisioning something along the lines of Evil Empire card, why they wouldn't want Microsoft or Monopoly, whatever. I get it. But Microsoft's trying to raise the bar. I mean, should we shoot them for that? No. We should support raising the bar.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they do a good job of it, that's cool, right?
Yeah, and they're a little big for a startup to come up and say we can do it better.
Yeah.
But think about the Microsoft we knew 20 years ago. Would we have even thought of them trying something like this?
Yeah, like would they have even supported? I mean, Microsoft has also played devil's advocate from the open source zealots, right? Has done a great job of supporting open source. Azure runs Linux. Microsoft Windows
runs Linux.
Right. Their third-party CA is validating Linux software so that it can participate in the secure boot process, which is a good thing for the community. So I think we've seen definitely a turning point there for a number of years.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. No, I have no objection to Microsoft. Go ahead.
It's funny that how many, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we would have said Microsoft, and if we said the word security in the same breath, it would have been anathema.
Right.
And now
remember when
they're literally at the forefront of it.
Remember when Microsoft first went on the internet and they did it with Solaris systems because Windows wasn't appropriate to be directly on the internet? And somebody like Bellamy said, we got to fix that.
Yeah, but then they tried to use Windows NT 351 to like run portions of the internet. They pushed that on ISPs and they got hacked 6 ways to Sunday.
Yeah.
Like bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they decided that was not cool, and we're going to change that. They've accelerated, but even back then, that was like they ate some serious crow and moved forward.
Mm-hmm. While we're on the topic of firmware, if you run Linux, I implore you to try the LVFS, Linux Vendor Firmware Service, or FWUpd, which allows you to update your firmware through Linux. One of the things in the new version that was released by a gentleman called Richard Hughes, who I really want to get on the show, I think it'd be a great interview. One of the new features is that FWUpd can now read and change firmware settings. So one, for developers, it can emulate BIOS settings of another machine, which is good for development, but they can also change BIOS settings through this facility that you can install within Linux. One of the more interesting things is that it can read a file from /etc and apply those firmware settings at startup. I also want to implore people to use this with great caution because changing your BIOS settings through this facility within the operating system could have adverse effects. Just saying. Like, use with caution. Use with caution. But it's documented, and there's some documentation on how it all works if you're pretty brave and want to try that. My general recommendation is that when you look into some of these BIOS settings, and I've been looking into a number of them, right, is go back to your hardware manufacturer and apply the latest BIOS update, right? Because I would rather have my BIOS settings changed and updated from my hardware manufacturer. One of the reasons I say that is that when you look at in deep into some of these firmware things, and firmware running on your respective hardware, is that it's tuned specifically for your specific hardware. Like, it's not, in a lot of cases, not very generic. Like, you can't really just take a generic firmware update and apply it to your hardware. That hardware manufacturer is like customized that firmware to run specifically on your model of laptop or computer. And so I always like to go back to my hardware manufacturer and go, all right, I want your Intel ME update. I want your BIOS update. I don't want to go mucking with a lot of stuff on my own. I want what you provide because it's very specific to that model, that version, and that hardware manufacturer. Unless you like bricking your systems, in which case that could happen.
I mean, Tyler loves bricking systems, but most of the rest of us, it's not our daily grind.
Other people's systems, maybe. Yeah.
Other valid. Other people's systems. As he puts it, hey, they deserved it. So
yeah,
I'm kidding. No, but like this whole thread of things we've been talking about for the last, half hour, 45 minutes really fits together nicely. From Mac doing deliberate drop dead dates on their hardware and firmware to Microsoft trying to build out some semblance of a reliable application and firmware and such signing capability list. What's the right word for that? Requirements list? I don't know.
Yeah. How do you term that? Requirements?
I don't know.
Minimum prerequisites. Yeah, prerequisites for like what constitutes being able to have software signed by Microsoft, right? It's a weird thing.
It is. But the point is that this whole set of things fits together. You've got Mac going, their solution is just anything more than 5 years old, not my problem anymore. Have a nice day. Microsoft is going, if you want to sign software with us, Here's the prerequisites to doing so. And we'll sign whatever you want as long as we term it safe and you've met the prerequisites.
The problem is, though,
so
as we've
going at this
established,
from very different angles.
As we've established, though, Josh and Lee, right, on this show and in other shows too, like, people run legacy hardware and software. And then what do you do? Like, that's the question I get a lot. Like, what do I do if I don't get an operating system update on this hardware, but I'm still using it? What do I do if I don't get a firmware update on this hardware and I'm still using it? Like, then what do you do?
Yeah.
Because then attackers are just going to target you. I mean, lots of malware targets stuff like that.
Isn't the counter argument for the average person that ain't broke, don't fix it?
Yeah, or you just keep going buy new hardware, which for the average end user, okay. Again, they have to think of their own personal budgets and things like that. But on the enterprise side, like, what if you can't? What if there's a million scenarios we've talked about in the past? I can't update that hardware. It's connected to some specialized equipment, some specialized software. Maybe that's a piece of a medical device. Maybe that's a building access system. Oh, I saw a picture of an Apple IIe that was still running software that was controlling some kind of building access, gate control, I think it was a gate control, like to make the security gates go up and down kind of thing. An Apple IIe.
Yeah.
That's what I learned to program on when I was 7 years old. And I'm old now. So that was a long time ago. And that shit
you're younger than me. Shut up.
That shit is still running, though, Josh.
I know.
Like,
dude, how many security card printing systems in security offices at large enterprises around the country and around the world are running Windows 90 something?
Too many. Yeah.
Too many.
Do you know how many X-ray machines run Windows XP?
All of them?
Most of them. Right. Okay. How many ultrasound machines run Windows Embedded? It was CE?
Windows CE. Yeah.
Windows CE, yes.
Yeah. Do you know how many of them run that? Most of them.
Probably most of them.
Okay. And even the newest ones. You buy a brand new one straight out of the factory. Do you know what it runs? Windows CE or Windows 98 or Windows XP. Why? Because that's the last time they bothered to get it certified by the FDA.
Right.
Even though the FDA clearly states you're allowed to update the operating system so that you can secure the machine. They're like, nah, we're good. We'll leave it alone. We don't want to screw with the FDA. It's like, no, the FDA told you was told you could. Yeah, but then we've got to deal with, what are those things? Device drivers?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that an Eclipsium line of business to help them with that?
Well, I mean, also you have the Secure Boot problem too. I mean, Secure Boot didn't come into play until 2011. So if you're then your computer is not going to support Secure Boot.
Well,
and now you're talking about like sensitive equipment, as we just outlined, that doesn't support Secure Boot, which enables persistence, which is bad.
Yeah.
Well, and it's even more insidious than that. I mean, I remember running across a series of oscilloscopes that were built on Windows XP with no service pack. So let's not challenge XP. Let's just put the latest service pack on it. Now we had a really pretty brick. It was very expensive. This was not good.
How many CNC machines, which build things that are absolutely essential for national security and manufacturing and supply chains and everything else, are running Windows XP? I'm not going to say
only because they
know,
can't get copies of DOS 3.1 anymore.
What's that?
I mean, only because they can't get copies of DOS 3 anymore. Because that's really all they needed. Well, they don't need a huge fancy OS.
6.22. I even remember it.
Okay, 6.22. Then I'll grant you that. But it's the same thing. That the OS they're running is overkill for what it does, and so there's not a good argument to change it.
Yeah, I think I don't know. In some ways, I want to argue that open source is a potential solution to this problem, because I think some of the problem relates back to proprietary software, in that the proprietary software ran on this really old operating system, and the only person that can update the proprietary software is said manufacturer of that software, and they're not gonna. However, if it is open source, you could then compile it with the newer operating systems, compile it for that. Now, granted, you may have to do some development work to make that happen. But since you have the source code, you can do that particular development work. Another company can kind of take over support and go, oh, we'll do this for you. The software is still going to be open source, but we'll provide that service for you so you can update to a modern operating system. We'll take care of managing and maintaining that open source software and making it work with this newer operating system so that you can be more modern, right? Open source does have the potential, I think, to help in the security aspect of what we're talking about. Maybe.
On the hacking vein, I wanted to cross over to my story number 2. Not so much that about them leveraging the log4j2 vulnerabilities, log4shell. What got my attention on this story is the attack chain they were using. It reads like something out of one of my SANS classes, where they got a log4j shell to get a footprint, then use PowerShell to leverage power to create some web shells, add a user, give them privileges, add the attack tools into the persistent startup folder so that if the system got rebooted, they were still there. Then they came back with Mimikatz for credential stuff, Remcom for lateral movement, and sending all their data to their C2 using a Legolo tunnel reverse proxy. I'm like, holy crap. Remember learning this stuff in class? And it's like somebody's actually doing this shit.
Maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
Yeah, I just think it's cool. Unfortunate if you're being attacked, but I just think that's just cool. And kudo, and Microsoft did the analysis on this, which is, another kudo for Microsoft. But I just thought, wow, that's neat. That's something you could do in a lab. That that's what I got at Access. Doing this, showing somebody how this freaking works would make it really real as to what can happen when you don't freaking patch this shit.
Patch none of it and don't do the basic detections, right? I mean, even sysmon and paying attention to any of those levels, this should set off all kinds of red flags.
Right. And the other telltale in there is this group that was doing this: Mercury, Muddy Water, Cobalt Oyster, Seedworm, Static Kitten, was going after Log4j and VMware, but enough VMware Log4j flaws got patched that they had to switch to another product, this called Sysaid, which was not being patched, even though they had patches out. So another reminder: even the attackers pivot to a different vulnerable product. Come on, guys. Mm-hmm. They're not going to die on their sword because this particular product isn't vulnerable anymore.
Well, and that you can't really just go after what necessarily attackers are going after in that vein.
No.
Like, it's been published and CISA puts out a report, and no knock on CISA, but Log4j flaws are being exploited in VMware, so everyone should go patch those. And that's all we need to pay attention to. But now you got this other software that you're running in your environment that also has Log4j, but you didn't patch that because it wasn't shown to be from any number of government agencies as being actively exploited. Like, you can't just chase actively exploited, in my mind. Sure, you should assign some sense of priority to that, but you got to patch most of your shit, or at least your shit that matters. And you can't just solely rely on the actively exploited. Yeah, it helps, but you can't stop there. Mm-hmm. That's a good example of that.
So anyway, like I said, I just thought it was a cool example, cool story, cool path there.
What is Sysaid? What is Sysaid?
It's I think it's a remote management, help system. So it's on a lot of systems, right? Because your help desk deploys their app across the enterprise, right? It's in the build.
VX Underground had released this thing, some screenshots. I don't know if you guys saw this story, but there was a 0 day for both iOS and I believe Android that was selling for $8 million. And what I thought was interesting about this one, like we could say, 0 days for iOS are selling on the underground for $8 million. The interesting thing here is you got to see the actual invoice.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
Where?
Hold on. I'll put the link in.
It takes you to the Twitter feed. Yeah, it's there.
It's there in the article. I'll paste it in Discord.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah, so
You're not joking.
That's the actual, like, that looks like an invoice that, like, I've created in Microsoft Word. It's like a Microsoft Word table invoice. Can I zoom in?
8 million pounds.
Or euros? Is that euros or pounds?
Euros. Excuse me, euros.
That's euros. And I think euros 1-to-1 for the dollar right now, as I was reading in the Twitter thread. Is that true?
And for that, they delivered a turnkey solution. How nice.
Yeah.
And a 12-month warranty. Holy moly.
12-month warranty. Support Android 12, latest version, plus 18 months back. 10 concurrent infections.
What did they sell this to?
A magazine of 100 successful infections. Does that mean, like, you get 100 systems, like, in your C2 server immediately? Is that what a magazine of 100 successful infections means? It was talk about that in the Twitter feed.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Cloud services
Is that you get 100? No, that's included. So 100 infections, maybe. Oh wait. Look at agent concurrency. 10 concurrent infections for both OS families. A total of 10 infections, which may be split between iOS and Android per the customer sole decision. Oh no. That's 8 million euros for 100 devices infected.
You think
so? If they want another 100, they gotta
buy it again.
Another some odd million euros.
Yeah, I don't know if that's is that access to the software to go infect stuff, or is that pre-infections, or both? A complete project plan will be provided by Intellexa to be approved and coordinated with the customer. Delivery and project plan, final design review, site acceptance testing, technical and operational methodology.
Oh, actually, I think I'm wrong. Look at the first picture. You see the devices, Oppo, Huawei, Honor, etc. Mm-hmm. There's 112 in there. So it might be that they're saying that they have 100 devices they can successfully infect.
Mm-hmm. Okay, gotcha. Hence the magazine.
And they gave them 12 extra just because they worked, they had them, and that way nobody can complain. But, I mean, that is... So who did they sell this to?
We don't know. It says leaked documents. I don't think they disclosed exactly.
An unknown buyer is what it says in the article.
Okay, so what you've got here is you've got an Israeli company, Intellexa, I think I'm getting that right, selling a zero-day exploit with a one-click exploit for iOS and Android to an unknown buyer. I'm presuming that it's going to a government because invoices like that don't often go to organized crime. It's a detail. So it's some nation-state system. Okay. And if that's the case, what you've got right there is another government that's going to go after journalists and another company that anybody that works at Intellexa, their employment is forever tarnished. Mm-hmm. What is it? NSO, the other Israeli company that has built some of these similar things. If you work at NSO, you're
Pegasus?
screwed. What?
Right. We're talking Pegasus malware.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The NSO wrote the Pegasus malware. If you ever work at NSO, there's a lot of companies that'll never hire you again for the rest of your life. Intellexa just became another one.
Yep. Craziness.
Doesn't even matter if you're a programmer, an executive, an accountant. Doesn't matter. You work there, your employment history is tarnished forever. That's a little scary. Mm-hmm. There's HR implications. There's legal implications. Like if you work there, had no idea of part of this. You're a pen tester, okay, and you check out exploits, or an incident responder checking out exploits and seeing what's going on with them. And yeah, your work is used in development of this, but you have no idea and you have no say, and you're not a part of it. But your employment history and possibilities are screwed because of this forever. I mean, there's going to be a lawsuit. I think that 8 million might be a drop in the bucket when they're done.
Think about collateral damage. Their CFO, their HR manager, people they're totally out of this loop, but yeah, they're going to be painted with the same brush. Bummer. I have a funny feeling that the iOS doesn't work anymore. But
could be.
Oh well.
Could be. So the internet has grown to allow so many beautiful things, right? I mean, since its inception, it's allowed creative works to thrive, people to communicate across the world, so many positive things, commerce to happen. It's also allowed a company called Shit Express to set up a website where you can send your friends or enemies a box of literal shit from animals, I'm told. You have your choice between, I believe the two, my friend went to the website. He said you have a choice between a horse and an elephant. They also have a SQL injection vulnerability and claim you should be anonymous if you send people poop, which, I mean, it's a pretty shitty thing to do to someone. I mean, there's so many puns we could make about this story. I mean, it really gives new meaning to...
You put such crap in these friggin' lists, man.
I know. It gives new meaning to taking a shit, although I suppose this is a literal example of giving a shit. And if you haven't used the site, does that mean you don't give a shit?
No, you don't gift a shit. It's close. It's close.
Gift shit. You know what? That would be a much better name for the website is Gift a Shit. Shit Express is a shitty name. Gift a Shit is what it should be called.
Just remember what George Carlin said. When it's my website, it's stuff. When it's theirs website, it's shit.
That's right.
Dear God. Dear God.
Yeah.
See, can you imagine having if you're working at a place and you send your boss a box of like elephant shit because he's such an asshole, and you're like, here's what comes out of you, jackass, whatever. And a year later, you're still working there, and this breach happens, and your boss comes, hey, elephant shit, huh? Yeah. How's that review come? It's come next week, isn't it? We'll talk. There's legitimate legal implications here, like bad shit could happen.
I mean, the website says, imagine all the people who annoy you the most: an irritating colleague, school teacher, your ex-wife, filthy boss, jealous neighbor, that successful former classmate, or all those pesky haters. You can send them. This is a real thing, apparently. I mean, I've not tested it, but like, it's a real thing. And they claim anonymously that you can do this anonymously, right? Like the payment processor holds your information. You can pay with Bitcoin. It's a 4-step shit buying process. You choose the animal, you give it an address, you can pick a sticker to put on the outside of the box, and then you can pay and stay anonymous, except, they had a SQL injection website. Yeah. I saw a cockroach and thought of you. I stepped on it. Some of the messages in the sample data set, because the messages were leaked. So, like, not only can you send someone a box of poo, but you can include a message with that. And these messages were leaked as part of the data breach. So it says, this gift shows my thanks for your hard work and is a symbol of how great my team thinks you are. Enjoy. That was someone's message to the recipient of a box of poop that they sent them through Shit Express. I can't make this shit up.
No.
So it said they had about 29,000 orders in the data.
$16.95 with free worldwide shipping.
I mean, that's a shitload of poo. Come on, Josh, we need more.
I'm responding to the Idi Amin comment on Discord. Not only was I called out for all the microphones on the desk, but thank you, Gus. You're awesome with the poo emojis.
Yes. I mean, they did disclose the breach and said they've spotted unusual activity. It's purely our fault. A human error happened. They said, no, the details stored in the database. So all the details are stored in our database, mostly junk because people are pranking their friends. We never mention or reveal real identity. They don't collect personal data. And the bleeping computer says, more companies should follow Shit Express's lead when it comes down to promptly responding to security issues and owning up to data breaches transparently. I mean, I guess when it comes to data breaches, they're the shit.
Yeah. And they take Bitcoin. No shit.
No shit. I mean...
No, that's full of shit. Bitcoin is full of shit. Let's be clear.
Just
but I mean, like, this is to be vaguely serious for just a second. There are ramifications and consequences to what you do, even on the internet.
That's right.
And anonymity is sometimes not anonymous, and privacy is sometimes not private. And if you're not really friggin' careful, you might have some problems in the world.
You could be in the shit.
You could be in the shit, dudes.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're all using our Tor browsers to check it out, not our real ones, right?
That's right.
Well, I mean, as long as you're not on one of Tyler's exit points.
Oh, I was hoping I was, but whatever.
I mean, when they were trying to find the vulnerability, I'm sure they threw some shit at the wall and see what would stick.
That is the crappiest pun ever.
Yeah, you little stinker.
It's just a shitty story.
Dude, we should flush these stories and just go with new ones, okay?
Yeah, let's just leave that.
I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't understand the amount of crap that we put into these story lists.
Well,
are we almost done? I don't know.
Right?
I mean, these things just write themselves.
Have we crapped out on this?
I think
I mean,
How often does a production team put the shit emoji on our webcast? Come on.
I mean, it's not the first time. Let's just put it that way. All right. I think I'm done talking shit.
Shit talker. Fucking shit talker. Grand Poobah.
I don't think we can top that.
Talker. Sorry, Lee. Go ahead. Was that?
Shall we go out on a low note?
Yeah, because that was the shittiest story we've ever covered.
Literally. Oh God.
And with that, folks, thank you very much for listening and watching this edition of Paul Security Weekly. Over and out.